how many children you have, if you have any, and what was it like growing up with Dad, with your father, and in addition to that, how do you feel by the impact of your father being in your life and how that has impacted you as a man today? And if the father wasn't present in someone's life, speak on how fatherhood has affected you right now, especially if you hold the wonderful prestige title of father. ETAN.
Well, first I want to thank Uncle Balti for letting us have this program. Thank you very much. And I want to thank all the men for lending their voice and their time to this very important issue. You know, I grew up in a single-parent household. And my parents got divorced when I was little. I was around my son's age now, around 6 or 7. And I had a lot of anger inside of me growing up. And it's interesting that, you know, this was a topic that I couldn't talk about when I was younger, growing up. I couldn't. Like, if you knew me growing up, this is a topic that you just don't really bring up with me, you know? And then I write a book about fatherhood, and I'm talking about it all the time. But that was like it took a while for me to get to that point where I was able to talk about it. And sometimes what you go through isn't for you. Sometimes it's for somebody else. You know what I mean? And I think that one of the things that I learned, which was a hard process, is the art of forgiveness. And that was hard for me. I'm going to tell you honestly, that was hard. And that's why I wanted to deal with entitle a whole chapter about it in the book, of learning how to forgive, because that is a hard thing. You know what I mean? I'm reading right now T.D. Jakes' book, Let It Go. It is hard. It's tough. You know what I mean? And there are things that sometimes, you know, I would be reminded of. And say I would, you know, go to school and there would be a father-son event, and my father not there. You know what I mean? And then the anger comes back. You know? Or I had I don't know if you remember when Jalen Rose and Grant Hill had their thing last year. It was a little spat. And I understood what Jalen Rose was saying because I was that kid. I would see somebody playing with their father and I would get jealous because I didn't have that. And right now when I'm places playing with Malcolm, I see other kids looking at us and I can tell what they're thinking because I know that look. You know what I mean? I know that look, and it's a hard thing to get past and to work past. And that's one of the reasons why I always have a passion of working with young people, because young people, and especially in correctional facilities, there's so much anger inside. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they're told so many negative statistics all the time about how they can't make it. You know what I mean? The adults are really good at throwing statistics at you. You know, and I heard it when I was younger. But I really wanted to put this together so young people can see that there are men who have gone through what you've gone through and have become successful, have been able to make the right choices. You don't have to go down a certain path. And that's the thing that I really, you know, it took me having to open up and talk about my past, you know what I mean? Something I didn't want to talk about at all, like I kept it to myself. And when I share with young people, they identify with me as somebody that has gone through what they're going through. So then I wanted to get other men to talk about their situations, their different stories, because nobody's here expert. I'm not no fatherhood expert. I'm learning with my kids every single day. You know what I mean? Every day it's a new adventure. But learning from other people's experiences really helps. And it was just as much of a learning experience listening to all the different people in the books, stories, and the things that they have to say, and the way that they opened up. It was really a blessing.
First of all, you know, of course, thank you for the time that all of you are taking to be here with us. I personally also am not a father. However, my father played a very, very, very important role to my development as an adult. I'm Latino from Peruvian descent, and my family came into this country with a suitcase in one hand and a dream in the other. And my father wasn't there when I grew up for many different reasons. And it wasn't until I became an adult that I realized how things worked. That anger that ETAN talked about, I had that anger when I didn't have my father or my mother at a game, at a basketball game, at a football game, where I had to walk home because I couldn't, my father didn't come and pick me up and whatnot. Things like that, when I was a younger kid, and I think a lot of youth deal with that, they just see anger immediately. That's the first thing that comes to mind. However, as an adult, you grow and you learn and see that those times were times to make life happen, to make those dreams come true. My family built themselves just like I built myself from the ground up with nothing. And in order to be able to do that, there was 3-4 jobs. There was no football, no basketball, no nothing, because you had to deal with that. As a kid, I didn't understand that. I didn't know that. And now, as an adult, I see that, and I see the difference that, and the role that played in, the importance that had into it. When I went into the sports broadcasting business, one of the biggest things I learned from my father was never, ever to quit. You're talking about a guy that had a good thing going on in Peru and left everything because he wanted his kids to have a better chance than he had, a better opportunity than he had. And I was a big football guy, I was a big soccer guy. Injury after injury shut another door in my face and shut another window. And the biggest thing he always said, he's like, hey, I may have not been there for you at this homecoming football game, or I may not have been there for you at this basketball game or at this soccer game, but I'm here for you to tell you that no matter what, if you think a door is shutting in your face, if you think a window is slamming shut, pick yourself right back up and just keep on going. So many doors shut in his face that I didn't realize as a child, that I had all that anger, being like, well, I don't understand why I have to go and walk home and everybody else's family can be there, but not mine. And as an adult, you see that those sacrifices were decisions made to better his life, to better our family's life, and to give my brothers and I an opportunity to reach that dream, to reach that goal. And one other thing outside of that is our culture. As an Hispanic American, it's very difficult sometimes as a kid to express your culture. You think, oh, I'm different. I like this, I like that, but it's very difficult to express that. One of the things he always said, and now it translates as an adult. We'll be doing Sports Center. You could see it on a highlight, and it's something that I take pride in and I love, is expressing that culture. When I was a kid, I was terrified. My name's Jorge. I was terrified that, hey, that's my name. Hey, I come from a Latin Hispanic background. That's how I am. And he taught me that. He's like, hey, keep your head up. If a door shuts in your face, pick yourself up. Be who you are. Express your culture. Don't be ashamed of that. And as an adult, I grew and I learned piece by piece of the sacrifices he made for me and the doors he opened for me in my culture, and how I could express that freely in any level whatsoever, whether it's meeting a person at a foundation, meeting a person on the street, or doing a show. Whatever it is, be yourself, express your culture, and know that it's okay. It was okay. Deal with that anger, if you will, as a kid, that it's okay that just because they weren't there wasn't anything particularly with you. It was doors and windows to be open while others were shut.
Tito.
Well, we have something in common, of course. Yo soy Latino. I came here. I want to first thank ETAN for inviting me I'm truly blessed to be here in this congregation and here in my hometown of New York City, where I was born and raised right down the street. And those of you know Tito Puente, my father, the Latin icon, he was, yeah. It's really an honor and a treat that ETAN asked me to come. But I was going to elaborate a little bit more on my father, but you guys already know him, so that's all right. Let's not talk about him. I want to talk about me being a father. And I think ETAN probably, he came to me and I kind of shed on a little bit of light of our culture, as we talked about, being Latino, and me being a father. What I learned from my dad, and I traveled around the world. I wasn't angry. So there are two types, two stereotypes. Oh, a father that has left you or maybe has neglected you, and then the father that's been there and then didn't really pay attention because he was 250 shows, concerts a year, and too busy on the road and too busy, I guess, being wow, can I say this? Having that ego and being a celebrity basketball player or a musician or a superstar. Michael Jackson's kids. I don't want to put myself in that category, but I kind of feel that my dad wasn't there emotionally, and I think that was missing. And I'm not being that father today. I got to tell you, I just got off the phone with my two little kids. My little boy, he's 4 years old. His name is Tito Puente Jr. the third. And my daughter, Miranda, who's 5. Adorable kids. Hi, Daddy, where are you? I'm with my friend ETAN, and we are talking about being daddies. Well, where? In New York. Oh, we want to go to New York and hang out with your friend ETAN. So they've seen your picture, by the way, and they've seen you in action. And it's cool talking to my kids because they don't understand the impact that one phone call made. That phone call to me is so important every single day. And I read that in your book. There was a chapter in your book of talking to your children every single day, even when you were on the road, hustling on the Wizards, all that, just busting your butt on the court. And that, to me, is what I deal with each and every day, speaking to my children and making sure that unique, intensified relationship is there. So maybe some of the men up here have not experienced that. Maybe some of the men haven't had a father figure in their lives. I think that's what was lacking and missing in my life at the time. So I have something in common with these gentlemen up here. But I will not let what my father did to me happen to my children. And I want to keep that unity. Yeah. Extremely important. And nowadays, come on, we got cell phones, emails. It's very easy to keep in contact with your kids. My kids are 4 and 5, so they really don't understand. But just having a cooperative mother helps. A cooperative mama really helps, but I think what's really most important is that they know that you're on the other end of that phone, and they know that you're reaching out to them, and they know that you're trying to be with them. My father went on the road for months at a time, Tito Puente, to Japan for months at a time, and I didn't hear from him. And when he came back, I kind of realized and knew who he was as I got older. But I think in my childhood, it was really, really important, especially growing up in this neighborhood, seeing other father figures. I gravitated towards them. And I gravitated towards other musicians and not my own father. And I'm glad today that I've learned through, I won't say his mistakes, but the learning process of being the son of Tito Puente, that I will not do that to my children, and I'll make sure that my kids make sure that they know who their grandfather was and who their daddy originally and supposedly is in a unique and very real style of being a good dad, making sure the communication is there. And I think that's what's lacking in a lot of youth today. If you're a mama out there, make sure that daddy talks to their children. It's really, really important. That's my message to you.
Really?
Like the panelists before me, I want to also thank ETAN for inviting me. And my relationship with ETAN goes back those 10 or 11 years, at least the 10 that he's been in the NBA and even prior to that. And we developed a very close relationship over that period of time. And I've come to truly admire and respect him and everything that he's trying to do. And so I'm happy to be here to support him. When I look around, I guess Obadeli and I are the two oldest heads up here on this panel. You know? But it's amazing when you hear the stories about, I guess the problem is really never going away, and it seems to be one that's germane, especially to people of color, families of color. My circumstance is not unlike most young black Americans. I was born and I was raised by my grandparents. My grandparents actually had 18 children, of which one was my mother. But my mother was married, and my mother had 3 children, my siblings, before me. And then my mother had this unexpected relationship. I was born, became the offspring, and then she reunited with her husband about a year or 2 after my birth, and so I was left to be reared by her parents. I think they did a great job. My grandparents, I couldn't think of any better role models than I had. They were poor, they were struggling, but they did everything they could to give me sort of a wholesome home environment. They were loving people, they were disciplinarians, they were extremely religious, but not overzealous. They tried to create whatever opportunity they could for me. And I think what I did was I struggled as a young kid with whether or not, I guess, my personal worth, because unlike today, I think being a single parent, child being raised by one parent, the stigma is not as great as it was when I was a young man. And when I was a young man, if you were an illegitimate child, it was something that people kind of frowned upon. But what I would always do, and I think maybe it was sort of out of protection, that I would let people know right off what my circumstance was, because there would be occasions where they would see my siblings through my mother, my half brothers and sisters, and they were of one hue, and then my father, when he ultimately got married, he was of a different hue, and they were much fairer, et cetera, and so people couldn't quite get this thing together, man. You know, you got these brothers and sisters over here, and they look one way, and then you got these over here, and they look another way, and what's going on? You know, they got a different name than you got, and so what I would do is I would always put it out front, because I knew that was going to be an issue that people had to overcome, and so I would generally just let them know. But I think what it did with me was, because I had a feeling of, I don't know whether as much insecurity or whether I just didn't feel as if I kind of merited that my value wasn't as great as everyone else's. I didn't get the kind of attention I thought that I should have gotten from my mother. And that was because my mother had gone back to her husband, and I was always taught by my grandparents that my place was with them. And they would kind of spell it out in certain ways, but as I got older, my aunts and uncles would kind of explain it to me. But I was also the beneficiary of an extended family, because my mother's siblings treated me like I was their son. In some instances, I was like their brother, because I was an extension of their immediate family, but I was also like one of their children. And so they were constantly making every effort to reassure me. But what it did was it compelled me to excel in everything that I ever tried to do. I became an outstanding athlete as a young boy. I played in the first Little League World Series on an integrated team in 1955 in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. We went to the final game and we lost 4-3 in extra innings. I played professional football with the Washington Redskins and the Miami Dolphins, so I made all-state football, I made all-state track, I made all-state baseball, and I studied extremely hard because I didn't want people to think that it was that stereotype back in the days about being an athlete and not being bright, but more importantly, being a black athlete and not being bright. And so consequently, I studied. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to, I guess, achieve whatever it was I felt I had to do in order to convince my mother, you know, I guess to try to get from her the kind of love that I thought I wanted. My grandmother was there, and she was extremely loving, and but for her, I don't think I would have ever made it. But my grandmother died when I was about 12 years of age, and I continued to live with my grandfather. And then my aunts, a couple of my aunts who broke up with their husbands, moved in. And so we always had a man or a woman in the house. I always had family. But it was sort of like a revolving door, because one week one would be there, and then they would reconcile with their husband, and then they would go back home, you know. And then 2 weeks later, somebody else would come with their children. You know, and then we would bunk up and be together, and then when they got it together, then they would go back home, and so that was sort of the way it was. And so I kind of grew up in that environment. But I think the biggest challenge was going around, especially when it got to the place where you wanted to date, and people wanted to know, what did your mom and daddy do? Well, you know, I would lie about what they did. I would make up stories about what they did. But I think as a consequence, I had decided that one day I would be something so that my children wouldn't have to go through it. And I have 4 children. And my relationship with my children is like the one that Tito described, because I was able to identify those areas that I believe were deficient in my own relationship. And I kind of fantasized as a child about what I wanted, what kind of family would I want. It's sort of like the white picket fence with the house and the whole 9 yards, you know, because of my athletic prowess, I got to travel and basically be with a lot of well-to-do white folk, you know, who would invite me into their homes because I played on the sports team with their son or what have you, and I saw how folk lived. And then I looked at and I knew how we lived, and I said, well, I don't want to be here the rest of my life. I got to escape from this thing some kind of way. And so it forced me to do what I did. But in the process, I decided that I would always be the kind of father to my children that I wanted my father and mother to have been for me, notwithstanding the fact that I had loving grandparents, and it had a lot to do with, I think, my stability, in that I had some hang-ups. I had them for the longest time, and I can remember on one occasion after I was married for quite a few years, my wife approached my mother. And this is when the lawyer, I'd been the United States attorney appointed by President Jimmy Carter, et cetera. And my mother had come out for the swearing in. And she and my wife got together. My wife said, you know, I popped a question to your mom. And I said, what question did you pop to my mom? He said, well, you know, I said to her, I said, listen, you look at your son, and he's successful, and he's done this, that, and the other. She said, but he's got some issues. And I think that maybe you can help resolve those issues. And so she said, well, what are the issues? She said, well, he wants to know how the hell you and his dad ever got together. You know, what brought that about? Because you were married, and what happened in your relationship with your husband that caused you to have, was it just one of those one-night affairs, or was it a long, enduring relationship for a year, or just how did it come about? And I think that was probably the biggest thing that I always struggled with as a kid, because, you know, I would have these nightmares, literally have nightmares about how my father and mother got together. And so I had this distaste, not only for my mother, but also for my father, and I struggled with that for years. And so people would go around and they would see me and think, well, this cat's got it together, but in reality, I struggled with that. But it was really when my wife come along and my children that they really helped me work through it. My wife and my daughters, and I've always sort of been open with my children. So they know everything there is to know about me. They know there's no hidden secrets. You know, I haven't hesitated to expose myself to them. But I think what it's done also is in my relationship with ETAN and all these other brothers in the league is that they can't come and present to me any issue about fatherhood and motherhood and relationships, et cetera, that I haven't experienced. So there's no naivete. You know, no guys have had it any different or any worse than I've had it. And so I think it makes it easy for me to kind of relate to them. If they want to tell stories, I got some stories to tell them. You know, if they want to talk about struggles, I can tell them about struggling. You know, the whole 9 yards. And so, but like I said, what it's done is convinced me to be the kind of father that I've been with my children. And folk who know us, they generally say to my wife and my children and that we're like the Huxtables, that when you come to our house, that's what it's like. And that's just a reality. I love my children, I love my grandchildren, and every moment I get, every free moment, I spend it with them. You know, I'm 70 years of age, and so when my grandchildren, I got 3 boys and a girl. And when those boys come, the oldest one is 4.5, when they come to my house, we're on the floor rolling and wrestling, and I'm kissing them and hugging them, and I tell them how much I love them, and Pop is there with them, and if anything happened to something, I'd kill somebody over them, the whole 9 yards. And so, you know, so that's where it is. But I think a lot of it has to do with your own acculturation and because of your experience. And so I appreciate the opportunity to come here tonight and kind of make this disclosure.
How are you doing? Before you speak, I just want to introduce you, gentlemen. He has just arrived, ladies and gentlemen. This is the grandson of Malcolm X, Mr. Malcolm Shabazz. How are you doing?
There were times when I knew that my father was right, even though I hated him with all of my might. He used to be so mean, he was never happy it seemed, and he made me work so hard, I never had time to dream. Daddy, Daddy Joe, you taught me things I needed to know, how to be strong, yeah, and take a blow. And never let your weakness show. Whoa, Daddy, Daddy Joe, you taught me things I needed to know. How to be strong, yeah, and take a blow. And never let your weakness show. I remember the day I wanted to run away because love was something I could not feel. It seemed nobody cared, life was unfair, and work was the only thing that was real. But my mother said, son, when your work is all done, you can go to a show with your friends. But do your work well, 'cause your father can tell, and he'll make you do the whole thing over again. Daddy, Daddy Joe, you taught me things I needed to know. How to be strong, yeah, and take a blow. And never let your weakness show. Whoa, Daddy, Daddy Joe, you taught me things I needed to know. How to be strong, yeah, and take a blow. And never let your weakness show. Now, when I got grown and was living on my own, I thought I would have a good time, but things were so hard and I couldn't stand that silly job, and peace was something I could not find. But as time moved on and I got strong, I remember what my father had said. And even though he was gone, his ways weren't all wrong, and his words will never, ever be dead. Y'all can join me, come on now. Daddy, Daddy Joe, you taught me things I needed to know. How to be strong, yeah, and take a blow. And never let your weakness show. Whoa, Daddy, Daddy Joe, you taught me things I needed to know. How to be strong, yeah, and take a blow. And never, ever let your weakness show. No, 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 no. Let me tell you something. I just wanted to change up on the pace if y'all didn't mind. The fact of the matter is, if my father walked in here right now, I would know him. Never saw him. It's okay. You heard the song, Daddy Joe. My aunt's husband. My aunt was my mother. She was the love of my life. And her husband was a mean dude from Savannah, Georgia. He brought Savannah, Georgia to Queens. I fed chickens and rabbits before I went to school. We had collard greens bigger than any bottom you could ever see. We grew collards, we grew tomatoes and corn and peppers. You can put me in the desert and I can survive. The man didn't give me no hugs. We never went fishing together. But he raised me. He taught me how to be a man. And I'm proud. There is always a man somewhere. It may not be your biological, but there is a man somewhere. It hurts me when I see brothers acting like girls because they didn't have a man around. It breaks my heart. I can't stand it. But I know it has a deeper problem than the fact that they just want to switch and act stupid. We are a fantastic people, and we have done outrageous things, but the basics have still got to be taken care of. You don't have to have somebody who is your biological to be a father or a mother. Care about the folks around you. That whole line about it takes a village to raise a child, that's true. Everybody's responsible. I do an open house in my house on Sundays just because we have to have some kind of guidance for these young people. I make salmon croquettes and I rock them. And I listen to poetry, I listen to problems, I listen to tears. I'll be a daddy for whoever, because I've had daddies for me. Somebody guided me. I started The Last Poets when I was 18. I didn't really start The Last Poets. Somebody encouraged me to do that.